Good afternoon, everybody, or morning, wherever you may be. My name is Daniel Martin with Permalot Corporation and the chair of the ASLA Emerging Professionals Committee. Good afternoon, everybody, or morning, wherever you may be. Officially welcome you, sorry for that audio problem. I'd like to officially welcome you to our newest edition of the ASLA Emerging Professional Committee's Ask Me Anything events. If you have been to these before, you are familiar with them. We give you 1 hour to ask whatever questions you like of our special guest for the day. You can use the Facebook comment section for this post to get your questions in, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can. Today, we are very honored to have a special guest, Mrs. Vaughn Rinner, the current president of the American Society of Landscape Architects. We are so excited to have you here, Vaughn. Welcome, and I'm going to give you just a moment to greet our viewers and kind of give any opening statements you want.
Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm really excited to be here. We're just 2 weeks away from the beginning of our annual meeting in LA, which is basically my meeting, and at the end of which I get to turn over the reins. So I've had a great year, and I'm very excited to be there. So I hope I'm going to see a lot of you at that time.
All right, yes, we are hoping that many of you will join us.
A great year, and I'm very excited to be there. So
I'm sorry, that was my fault right there. We are hoping that many of you viewers will join us at the ASLA annual meeting. It is one of the highlights of the year, I think, for me and for many ASLA members, when everybody gets together with some amazing education, some amazing socializing and networking opportunities, which we're going to get into more of that in a little while, so stay tuned. And if you have questions about the annual meeting, feel free to ask those as well. So I just want to start off, Vaughn, by talking a little bit about you and some of your background and history and how you ended up in the position of ASLA president that you are currently in. So let's start just by talking about some of your background and how you found landscape architecture and kind of your career path and throughout the profession. So take it away.
Okay, that's telling you about a lot of my life. Because I've been a practicing landscape architect for well over 40 years. And I actually came to it as a second career. I had a degree in art and never heard of landscape architecture. And I'd been working as an artist. I was out in Colorado and discovered landscape architecture at that time, heard about it from someone, and decided that was really what I should be. I loved the outdoors, I loved art, I loved design, and I just really wanted to find a profession where I could use all those things. So it was pretty exciting to hear at that time, and there was no landscape architecture program in the state of Colorado. Thanks. Is that working all right, Daniel?
Yeah.
Anyhow, so I actually went back to Iowa, where I grew up in Iowa, and went to Iowa State, which had a really good program, and became a landscape architect there. So I took a second bachelor's degree because I really wanted to be able to design, and at that time the graduate programs really pretty much aimed towards sort of master planning and conceptual kind of work. I didn't get as much actual training and being able to practice. So I've been in private practice ever since that time. And I worked in Syracuse, New York for about 10 years for a very small firm, and then I moved to Hampton Roads in Norfolk, Virginia, where I was in practice for about 30 years. And there I worked in an interdisciplinary firm, so I was a principal that handled landscape architecture, and we had engineering and environmental sciences, surveying. So we had a whole range of site services, but not architecture. So I have a pretty wide range of kind of projects I worked on. It was a regional firm, and then I actually spent 3 years just as a private practitioner, as a consultant. And 3 years ago, I moved to Seattle. So I live in Seattle, Washington now. I moved there because my children are there, and now I have two grandsons there, so it's pretty family-oriented. But my son is also a landscape architect. My daughter's an environmental artist, and my son-in-law is an environmental planner, so we still all have a lot of the same interests. That kind of gives an overview of my background, in terms of any questions people might ask.
You could have quite the family firm with
yes.
with that crowd. You wouldn't even have to bring anybody from outside.
Yeah, it could really be multidisciplinary.
Exactly. Yes. Inter-family transdisciplinary.
Yes, exactly. So I actually, in terms of my involvement with the ASLA, I actually heard some about it at Iowa State, and I was the winner of the Merit Award assigned from from Iowa State the year I was graduated, so that kind of brought me to the attention. And then the firm that I joined in Syracuse, they actually came and interviewed out there because they wanted to hire someone from Iowa State, and they were very strongly involved in the ASLA. One of the owners of the firm was the trustee at the time, so I became pretty involved at that point, and did quite a bit. One of the things I did, which really had a notable effect, was I went to the first Women in Landscape Architecture symposium that was held in Virginia.
Okay.
Darwina Neal was president of the ASLA, and then when I moved to Virginia is when I became really intensely involved, because I got a call almost as soon as I moved there asking me if I would run for treasurer.
Oh, wow.
Not that I knew that much about treasurer, but from then on I've been involved in the finances of the ASLA, because I worked about 10 years with the chapter and that, in addition to being president and then trustee. And then I was elected vice president for finance and investment. So I was in that before I became president. So
that's probably a pretty typical path. You start at a chapter level in some sort of volunteer position, executive committee, then maybe president trustee of the chapter, then move on to national vice president, and then maybe on to the president. So those of you that are looking to one day sit in this chair, in Vaughn's chair, there you go. There's your path. Get involved right away.
That's it.
How long that process, from starting off there through president, 15, 20 plus years. I mean, probably it varies for everybody, but that's kind of probably a typical.
Yeah, that's about right. I've spent about 24 years in really active involvement with ASLA, because the other part of it is serving on the national committees, and I've served on a lot of national committees, and I recommend that to anybody. It's so interesting, and you really learn a lot, and that's the other way that you start to, mix with more people out of your area and everything.
Right. Okay. Excellent. It looks like we are getting maybe some comments that there is some sort of an echo thing going on. If that is indeed the case, can more people maybe comment and see if that's across the board? I apologize if it is, and we'll figure it out. It sounds good here. So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about how you got involved in ASLA and what that path to the presidency was like. So once you reach this level of president, so you decide you're going to run for president, you get elected, what happens then? what all is involved in that actual process?
The actual process is there's a nominating committee, and so you get invited. You get the question, would you consider running if you were nominated first? Because they want to know that people would be willing to run for either the vice presidencies or the president elect. And then if you are nominated, then there's a process of answering questions, and I hope everybody's familiar with that. Everybody is voting and paying attention to the national leadership. you have a series of questions. You write about, write responses. You make a statement, give some bio information. So we try to get a good amount of information out to people, a lot more than we used to for the past several years. And then we actually make speeches at the Board of Trustees meeting in the mid-year. And after that, those are actually put online so that people can hear us talk and talk about what some of our ideas and goals are. And then the membership across the board votes, and that's when you find out if you're elected or not. If you are, it's actually a 3-year process because you get to spend a year as president-elect, and you actually start coming to a meeting a half year before that. So there's quite a bit you do as president-elect, and then you have a year of being president. And it's been really interesting to me, but it's a very intense travel schedule. We really try to get a lot of leadership visits, get out to a lot of chapters. We go out to the schools with Daniel. Takes us to the schools, which is very interesting. I love those visits to the schools, and we're looking forward to doing more in the next year. And then you're still on the executive committee for another year, serving in various roles as the immediate past president. So, including, for example, sitting on the board of the meeting with the board of the Landscape Architecture Foundation. We do a lot to really link all of the different organizations that are involved in landscape architecture, including the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. We're trying to make sure we're all working for the profession in ways that fit our mission and that are most effective. So, kind of give you an overview of what goes through it.
Right. So you mentioned the travel. I think I heard recently Chad Danos, the immediate past president, who was getting ready to finish his 3 years. I think he said he's traveled 7 times around the equator in his time period so far. He was doing some math. That's a lot. So you're seeing a lot of people when you're out there. I know at the schools. And even the chapters, you're letting them know what's going on at ASLA National, kind of what current initiatives are and things like that. Were there any particular items or initiatives that you really pushed or championed that kind of will define your term as presidency, or that you would like to see define your term?
Well, I guess one of the most important ones is really going the next step and thinking, how can the ASLA take a much stronger role in helping to deal with the impacts of climate change? And this has been something that one of the things that sometimes people aren't so aware of, perhaps, is that the ASLA is a really incredibly well-run organization. We have this really dynamite staff. And we do a really good long-term strategic planning. So everything builds on everything else year after year. So we build up to these things. So it isn't you don't see startling changes too much. But this year we've really taken on the climate change. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. for a meeting of the Blue Ribbon Panel on climate change and resilience that we put together over the course of the year. And this is really dealing with all the design professions as well as public elected officials and people that work with policy, because our goal is to really find ways that we think we can be effective in influencing policy at the federal and local and state levels. That we think as an major advocacy organization, we think that's probably the most important thing we could do, is to think how to advocate better for that, and to also talk about what landscape architects do, and to make specific recommendations. And we've been working on this for a long time, because we have really good pages on resilience. We just haven't, and we've had a policy since 2008, so we've had a policy for almost 10 years, which we're revising this year, looking at right now. To make sure we're kind of up to date with all the things that have been learned over the past 10 years. Everything's changing so fast with the situations. We've also spoken out very strongly for put out a lot of information about green infrastructure. And the Kresge Foundation, in fact, said we're one of the most influential organizations relative to issues of climate change. And we've had a lot of praise for our resilience pieces on the web page. So if anybody hasn't seen those, you really should look at them. They've got all kinds of references and sources and projects and about about six different aspects of climate change impacts that we work with most. So that's probably one of the real big things. We're also looking at some rebranding. We really try to make sure that how we're putting ourselves out in the world is meeting contemporary needs. And the other thing we've been working really hard on, and I think we've really made some big strides this year, and a lot more things to build on. It's kind of a dual initiative. It's really trying to get the profession more diverse. We really want to look like the rest of the population. We really need to have people that can work in all these different communities. And also to really get our emerging professionals much more engaged, trying to make sure we have a lot of engagement with younger people we know. I often say, gee, I wish all the young people in the world could just take over and rule it now. We might be making a lot more strides, which is a fine thing for a gray-haired person like me to say. But and I think we've been really successful with it. I mean, Daniel, you could probably speak to that as much as me, being the chair of the Emerging Professionals Committee. But it's I've really seen a lot more involvement. Everywhere I've gone, and we've made a lot of specific advances. And so I think those are the ones that really I feel the strongest about at this point.
Right, that's great. And obviously, students and emerging professionals are extremely important to ASLA. I know a lot of initiatives, a lot of things going on for outreach to that particular group of people. A lot of talk about how important they are to the society. What do you think that ASLA could do to make sure that they're important to ASLA, but how do we make ASLA important?
Yeah, I always call the ASLA our commons, and of course that's our theme for the annual meeting this year. And it kind of hits at something that has been throughout my thinking, is that I think as much as anything else, we really get benefit out of the ASLA in so many ways, but we're a small profession, and I don't think we're ever going to be a really big profession, because I think it takes a certain kind of way of being able to think about big issues and details at the same time, and everybody's minds work a little differently, but as people have looked at different kinds of patterns of personality and the way people work together and think, I think we're not going to be huge. So we need to speak with a big voice, and it's the ways we work together to support the profession also supports us as individuals. So being part of that community, that common community, is invaluable to you as you operate in the profession, because you get to meet people, you get to see a lot of information, you're always going to be at the cutting edge, so it really helps you building business and the kinds of work you do. I think it's been one of the strongest forces in my life, and I really don't. I think anybody's remiss if they don't understand that that's going to be a benefit to them.
All right, we're going to take a couple questions that have come in from the audience real quick, and then we'll move into other areas. Theodore Lee asks, what is ASLA doing to support sites?
Well, what we've done with sites, of course, it was over 10 years, 10 years in the making. And we were very happy to have been able to turn it over to the U.S. Green Building Council. GCBI is running the program now for us. We still are involved in an advisory capacity. We still do a lot of research. Of course, a lot of landscape architects are the first people that have been accredited professionals and that have been doing the project. So we're very strongly aligned with it, but we no longer have to completely support it. So that's very good. I'm accredited sites professional. I think we should all become them. The whole idea of working with the ecosystem services is so fundamental to our practice. I hope that answers the question. Further.
Yes, I am sure. All right, another question. You touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can dive into more detail from Diane. She asks, as a landscape architect and president of ASLA, what would you say is the general picture of this profession in connection of the climate change issue?
I think we absolutely are the leaders. What I always have said is I think our specialty is making connections. And the issue with climate change, and how to deal with the impacts and what has caused all these things, is so systemic and it's so complex that it's people like landscape architects who really can think about all these aspects of the built environment as well as the natural environment that can really help lead some of these other professions in the ways to do things about it. Some of that is specific kinds of design. Some of it is helping communities plan. But an awful lot of it is sort of an educational process and the way we embed in our communities and work with them in that kind of public process that's so important to the design of all of our public spaces, our streets, and everything. So I see it as a really comprehensive sort of thing, and it kind of works from all the little measures you take at the site level to the much more global issues of regional planning and thinking in terms of bioregions and just the kind of concept we have that are the ways we have to address the world and change the way we do things in order to keep human beings on the planet, I guess you could say.
It's important.
Yes, it's important to all of us, I guess.
Certainly. All right. And the next question, we'll do one more from the audience here. And if you are watching and you have questions, definitely feel free to type them in, and we're getting to as many as we can. But the next question, if this is something that comes up often, and if we're going to, as landscape architects, have the impact through climate change and these other avenues that we desire to have, something that is important is that people know what landscape architects do and what landscape architecture is. So the next question fits into there. How do you frame what you do when speaking to engineers that think landscape architecture is just about aesthetics?
Well, I guess it depends on the context of why you're talking to those engineers. Having worked with civil engineers for 30-some years directly in an office, I think it's how you talk and think with them on a day-to-day basis that matters. Otherwise, I just describe it, trying to think other kinds of situations where you actually run into that situation. It can be difficult sometimes when you're not part of you don't have a direct relationship and you're working with a civil engineer on a project and he doesn't understand quite what you do. And so anything you can explain in very specific terms, I think, helps the most. Trying to be real general as you're trying to deal with a more quality of how you work together on projects, I think, clouds the situation instead of clarifying it.
Let's take that broader and general public awareness of the profession. So, an engineer is at least going to have some idea of what a landscape architect does, even if they think it is just aesthetics. So, that outside of the profession, how do we make more people aware of what landscape architecture is? A question that's often come up in these Ask Me Anything events is, if you could change the name of landscape architecture, what would you change it to make it people understand it more? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think we should change the name of landscape architecture because we have a long and complete history of that, and I've never been a proponent of thinking that the name itself is a problem. I don't really think it is, but I think the first thing, if you ever have a reason to join the ASLA, you join it because of the need for visibility of our profession, because it's not a well-known or well-understood profession. And it is frustrating as you deal with a lifetime of trying to get more people to know about and educate about it. But I think that that we're being much more effective over time. I think there really is a growing understanding. And one of the things about living quite a few years is sometimes you have to look at where it was to say where it is now, and to appreciate the changes and the understanding. And there's a lot broader understanding. 20, 25 years ago, you really just didn't hear of landscape architects, and now we're in the news a lot. And this is, when we're mentioned, and now we get our names there. They still call us landscapers sometimes, and they still call us gardeners sometimes. But most of the time, now they're starting to get those 2 words put in there of our title when they have us in news articles and things. And there's a lot more acknowledgement from allied professionals as well of what we do and the importance of what we do. So I think it's one of those things that you just keep working at. It is probably the highest priority of the ASLA. We come out with, we do review what our members think are the highest priorities in their advocacy and public awareness. And so you have things like landscape architecture, World Landscape Architecture Month, when we get these huge use social media to get more and more people knowing about us, and it goes around all countries around the world, and we get millions of posts of different projects. So I think those kinds of things that we just all need to keep working at, but we definitely need to support our organizations for that reason, because that's the biggest thing, that we do for each other through the ASLA. I don't know if that's a...
And one of the biggest groups that we need to convince about the importance of landscape architecture and the importance of the work that is done are politicians. I know that there's been a lot of issues with licensure in many different states lately, trying to deregulate landscape architecture, and ASLA is obviously heavily involved in advocacy and defending that. I want to talk a little bit about ASLA's advocacy efforts and how that works.
Well, we do a lot. We work with all the states. We very closely align with CLARB, the Council for Landscape Architectural Registration Boards. In fact, we just had a meeting with them just 3 or 4 weeks ago, again, at their annual meeting where we are strongly involved. So we do a lot of linkage to make sure that we're using all the different aspects of how we can approach this. And so far, I think the good thing is it's a lot of work, and there are a lot of threats these days, and the threats are coming. It used to be they were just kind of state, but now there's actually these national efforts to deal with deregulation, period. It's all part of the make government smaller. And so regarding the regulations, they're really protections, but they're thinking of them as inhibiting the ability of people to work. The good side of that, in my opinion, even though it's a lot of work and takes a lot of effort on the part of our chapters and our boards and our national advocacy staff, is that I think it is actually creating more awareness of what landscape architects do, because we're having to go into each of these states. I think in Arizona, when this came up last year, some 400 or 500 landscape architects showed up and spoke to it and everything. So suddenly people are saying, oh, I didn't know that's what landscape architects did. So, much as it seems a struggle and you feel endangered by it, if it allows us to tell more and more politicians what we do, we may see a really good side of this.
Right.
So,
absolutely. I think I heard in Arizona, the governor's office actually called and said, call off your dogs, we get it.
Yes, exactly. They finally get it.
Response from the landscape architecture community, and that okay, we got it. You guys are important, which is great.
Right.
Let's take another question. A little lighter here. Go to Jennifer. As president, traveling across the country, what has been your favorite place or landscape that you have visited?
Oh my, that would be hard to say. One of the things that's been so great is you go and see so many places where people are doing a lot of interesting things. And so there are places that I hadn't been before that I just go, wow, this is great. One of them was like Greenville, South Carolina, where I went for the meeting last year. You go into these communities where they've remade themselves and are these really wonderful places. And that one I found particularly interesting because Lawrence Halpern actually worked there many, many years ago, and they've got a big tree-lined Main Street because of his work. And then it comes around and what it means. So you start to understand how things take some time to change, but become, the small interventions become really important. But I really love traveling around the United States and seeing all kinds of geographies. I've been everywhere but 2 states. They always have this things of where have you not been? I haven't gone to Alaska yet, so that's my next goal.
Right.
And for some reason, I've circled all the way around Arkansas, which is too bad because I hear it's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
But I really can't say I have a favorite. I've enjoyed the big cities. I just came back from Detroit, from the meeting in Michigan chapter last week before. They're all running together right now because I'm doing a lot just before the end of my term. But I thought it was just so exciting to see what's going on there and the energy of people, both in terms of sort of the general population of what they're doing and what landscape architects are doing and what politicians are doing. So I think we're just seeing some really wonderful resurgence in both small cities and large cities that's very exciting because, of course, that all relates again back to the climate change issues of needing to live more densely, and we're becoming more and more urbanized, but allows us to have a smaller footprint to be able to have more walkable places. And so that's generally what's been really exciting for me. New York is just incredible now, the things they're doing in terms of greening up every little space, and getting rid of fences around parks. I mean, I could go on and on.
All right, we'll jump to the next question. We've got a lot coming in here, so we'll just keep going through these.
That's good.
Next question, what do you think about landscape architecture industry in Asia? Does ASLA have any collaboration and sharing in terms of knowledge, technology, or other?
Well, this year the ASLA meeting, the Council of Educators in Landscape Architecture, held their meeting in Beijing. So I attended that along with Susan Apollonia, our Director of Education at the ASLA. And it was really amazing. It was the biggest meeting they've ever had. We had it in Beijing, and there were 3 universities there training thousands of landscape architects. So they're able to have impact in very different ways, but it was just a really interesting exchange of ideas. We had several, we presented quite a bit about the ASLA. We got to hear about how they're working. They really don't have the kind of organization, professional organization there that we do. And so I think there's a lot of interest in that, to think how, because in some ways you could say it's an old profession, even though it didn't have the name landscape architecture, because there's been so much environmental design and planning as a part of China for centuries. On the other hand, it's a pretty new profession in some ways, but very highly regarded now and very important. So I think we're seeing more and more collaboration. Everybody's interested in saying, it was all about making connections, that we need to all be connecting with each other globally. So I think that our relationships with China, for example, because we're training a lot of Chinese landscape architects in our schools here too, which I think really helps with the dialogue. So I think there's really growing back and forth collaboration, people working back and forth, and that it's great we're sharing education too.
Do you see any difference in the way they practice compared to practice in the West? Any difference?
Oh yeah, they really do practice very differently. It's a very different kind of government and a very different kind of world. So how they're able to work is really quite different than the way we do it. And I think it's interesting, the firms, some of the people that I've talked to, firms here in the here in the U.S. who are practicing a lot there, that I think a lot of the work is done at a fairly detailed but still somewhat conceptual level, and then it gets turned over to local firms to implement it. And so I think that's a difference in how it happens, and I'm not sure internally just how they do that. Excuse me a second.
No problem. We'll hit our next question here from a student. Oh boy, this sounds like every student. What experience do you recommend to a curious landscape student that is bored of university?
Well, travel as much as you can. Go out and look at things. And a lot of the look. It's really interesting the way when I was just in Detroit, they had a sketch crawl, and it was really interesting how they presented doing it and thinking about that observational piece. And I just hadn't thought about it too much lately because I hadn't been drawing as much as I should. And I think going out and looking at things in that way of sketching and really kind of seeing how they're put together can really create a lot more interest for yourself. It kind of feeds back yourself of how you pay attention, makes a big difference. And then there's tons of outside reading that's worthwhile. There's two books that I think it really does landscape architects a lot of good to read relative to some of these issues. Now, one of them is called After Nature, a Politics for the Anthropocene by Jedediah Purdy. He's actually an attorney. He's a law professor at Duke. He writes it, being able to think about things in kind of this long perspective and to see how what we do fits in with a larger picture is a really big part of that. So sometimes when you get caught up in the day-to-day stuff, it's really good to kind of step back. And the other one that has a really nice long view of what really is life on Earth and how do we really influence Earth and humankind by David Ginspoon. He's an astrobiologist. And so I find that a big relief when I get kind of caught up in small things, and also in terms of the frustrations you can deal with of trying to change. Just sometimes you got to take the big view. So a planetary view of life is kind of handy.
Great. All right. All right, we're going to hop in. I'm going to take one more question here that we have sitting out here from the audience, and then we're going to maybe transition a little bit into talking about the annual meeting coming up.
Yes.
But audience, if you have questions, annual meeting related, or any questions, still feel free to put those in there, and we'll get to as many as we can. But this next question, in all of your travels, did you leave a lamb around? It's it's something that people have been pushing, leaving your magazine in strange places for people to find and kind of spread the word. Any interesting lamb leavings on your trip?
I've done a few. I'm afraid that as I've traveled and the amount of things I have to carry with me when I've gone for long periods of time, the extra weight of the lamb is challenging. But yes, I do occasionally get them so that I can leave them around and get extra ones. Fortunately or unfortunately, I find them invaluable, so I've kept my lambs for all my years. So it's one of the heavy things I carry around in my life. So they're pretty wonderful. The other one, though, that I just loved the Your Land that came out aimed at students in sort of early high school, late middle school.
Right.
That's what I'd like to leave everywhere, because I think if we could just, we really need to reach out into that next generation and get them knowing about the profession earlier in life. And I thought that was invaluable. So I'm hoping, I know we stretch what the staff can do, but I'm hoping we're able to do more of those. And if anybody hasn't seen it, be sure and look at it online at least. And if you're doing things in the communities and the schools, you can get copies of it to distribute in the schools. And I know some of the students in the landscape architecture programs have been doing some things pretty actively with high schools. And that's available for that purpose too. Yeah. So it's a little off the subject of the question.
No, that's good. That was an amazing piece that was put out. And I think every incoming freshman in a landscape architecture program should have one of those sent to their parents immediately, so that
that's a good idea.
Their parents can understand what they're doing and help spread the word.
That's a good idea. Have you made that suggestion to the staff? If they haven't, I will.
Yeah, I haven't directly to Brad or anybody at the magazine, so yeah, maybe I should do that. All right, let's. We've got about 20 minutes left here, so let's talk about the annual meeting and all of the exciting things that will be going on in Los Angeles. We are just over 2 weeks out before the big kickoff. I know as president, this is kind of the cap or the final note on your year as president, and each annual meeting is sort of defined by the president with a theme. We want to talk about what the theme this year and how that came about and what your thoughts on that are.
The theme this year is common ground, and there's a couple of ways that evolved. It was actually several years ago that I went to one of the annual meetings, and it was in the bookstore. One of the great things is you go in the expo and there's the bookstore, and so you actually see a lot of it's seen books you've heard of, and whether this is one you should get right now or something. But there was one here. In fact, I just this minute thought I think it's sitting right next to me. Yes, I'll show it to you. Right here in my bookshelf. Think Like a Commoner. And I thought this was really interesting. I thought this is an interesting book to find in the LA bookstore. And it made so much sense, like enclosing public spaces and infrastructure. It's a wonderful book. And so that got me thinking a lot more about the commons and how important they are in so many ways. And so since then, it had been more and more an evolving idea. And as I was running for president of the ASLA, that was one of the things I really started to think about was the importance of the commons in our lives. And I think particularly as we start dealing with things like climate change, it again becomes even more important. And that's a couple of those books I recommended. That's one of the things they're really dealing with. So I think of it as the ASLA as our commons in one way, but also thinking about the things that we work with are the common elements of our lives, air, light, water, soil. They're things that all life shares and that we have to find ways to share together, and that having a commons means that you also have to take care of it. So that's built in throughout our thoughts, from the small projects of how do we maintain and how do we keep it going, the emphasis on that now. And that's what we need to think about the whole globe in that sense is, okay, how are we going to maintain this place and take care of it? So that's kind of the theme that I brought to the meeting. And of course, the education sessions aren't proposed or selected based upon the theme. Nobody's saying, okay, now send us proposals about common ground. In fact, they don't even know when they submit. But I think it's really interesting when you look at the catalog, which I also have here on my desk, that I didn't get them. I'm just trying to prepare for the meeting. Here it is over on my computer. But there's some incredible sessions. It's sort of a continuation of a trend we've had for a number of years of really people are coming in and really dealing with some big issues of connectivity and collaboration and projects that are really looking at ecosystem services and building into it. And there's so many good sessions about all those things that I think it's going to be one of the best education meetings. I had thinking about being president, when you go to the meeting, they keep warning me, and the ASLA staff has kept warning me, you're not going to have much time. You got to be prepared to rest whenever you can. You're going to be all these places. And so last week when I was in DC at the headquarters, I said, okay, you talk me through this meeting and tell me. I said, I need to get some education credits. and I particularly need some sites credits now that I'm an AP. And so they talked me through the whole thing, and it got me really focused. There's just so many interesting events. And the expo is going to be exceptionally interesting this year, too. And, of course, that's always, some people come more for the expo than anything else. Right. So I was able to isolate about 4 education sessions that I can go. But good. I hope everybody else that comes makes it to a lot more than that, because right. I've always found them invaluable in terms of what you learn.
Yeah, there are a ton of sessions, and like you said, a lot of really great sessions. The one thing that ASLA does very well is a majority of the sessions, most of them are are panels, so you're not just getting one voice or one point of view, but you're getting kind of a panel or multiple voices, which I think is unique and makes it a little more diverse, and you get a little more out of them. Do you know how many possible CEU credits a person could get?
I tell you, I did not memorize that number,
Yeah,
but it's a lot more than you'd ever need.
It's got to be more than you would ever need.
Yeah, because you have an all-day Friday, all-day Saturday. I mean, a good part of the day Saturday, because we break it up with the Expo. Sunday, the same thing, and then Monday, all day again. So
right.
if you were going to get all of it, you'd have a lot of hours that you could attend sessions.
And you not only have just the kind of in classroom sessions, but there are like tours, walking tours, sketch crawls. I think there's a biking tour, all sorts of I think field trip out to Ojai. So lots of variety and things you can do. One thing last year in New Orleans at the annual meeting that was phenomenal was the general sessions. Both of the sessions they did last year were great. What's happening for general sessions this year? What do we have to look forward to there?
Oh, that's going to be very exciting, because one of them is really talking about clean power and a lot of what we can do with that one. And the other one's talking about the future of design and the future of professions. So we have really interesting people. I think they're going to be great discussions, and they're also the kind of thing that I think is going to really stimulate a lot of discussion going into the more specific sessions. So it's really, I'm very excited about the meeting. I think it's going to be great.
Excellent. Now, education is important, and we've covered that a lot, but I think something nearly equally as important at the annual meeting is the socializing and networking.
Yes, definitely.
Lots of opportunities for that, I know. You
Yeah.
talked about the expo, where you can get around and see vendors and products and that, but the expo floor is a great place to see people you haven't seen, to meet new people, to network, students, emerging professionals, find your future boss.
Yep, really, you can get portfolio reviews and sign up for those, and then we have the alumni reception, but that's all combined with just a lot of fun. We're doing more and more things on the floor. One of the things we're doing on the expo floor, which is really fun to see, is we actually have a contest for, or it's a sort of a contest or an awards that's given to our vendors that really do great advertising in the LAM. And that's always an interesting discussion and things, and we're putting that on the expo floor this year. So there'll be even more things happening where it's easier for people to participate in them instead of having them back at the hotel. And of course, a number of our vendors and companies and allied organizations put on events too. So there's plenty of social events to go to. more than you could possibly make it to, probably.
Yeah, we'll drop a Land 8 happy hour plug there.
Yes, Land 8 happy hour, always a good one.
It's a great one. You can also get education on the expo floor with some the little classroom sessions, and then also the PPN networks are doing walking tours through the expo floor to different vendors. So that's great. Awards ceremony. Want to talk about awards?
Oh, yes, we have the awards for both the students and the professionals, and those will be sort of midday. And that's, there's a lot to see there. And in addition, the other thing that you get is a lot of good displays. And again, that'll be on the expo floor where you can see displays, particularly about the student projects. And also the sketch crawls always put up their sketches. And one we just did in Detroit was really fun to see the sketches that everybody had made and things. So there's numerous things all over. The bookstore, the Cultural Landscape Foundation always has a nice auction to support that. Even if you don't want to buy something, it's fun to go see what people donate to that. So
it's definitely not possible to be bored at the annual meeting.
No, that's exactly right. And a lot of good spaces. I think the other thing that's good, there's a lot of good spaces for people to converse and sit around, so you can be on the expo floor, but it also is like you said, it's a place for networking, socializing, where people see each other. So it's a great way to mix. You don't have to wonder, where can I go if I want to see people? You always find people and meet more and more people there. So it's great.
And how is attendance looking for this year?
It's looking very good. We had I haven't heard the numbers this week, but as of last week, we're way ahead. Our expo is completely sold out. We had to actually create some more space on the floor for some other people to come. So I think we'll have some great vendors there. So I think a good part of the sessions are closed out in terms of the field sessions and the tours. So we're going to have a lot of people there. It'll be good to see. And we always get quite a few walk-ins, and I think in Los Angeles we're likely to get even more of those. It's just a great location now, Convention Center, downtown Los Angeles, the parks and the places you can walk to and the museums that are right there. There's so many things to see that you got to create a little time just to go around in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And students, emerging professionals that may be watching, maybe close enough to get there, but can't necessarily afford the full registration. There are lots of ways to get on the expo floor,
Right.
at no charge. So definitely look into. You can get a lot out just by being there, even on the expo floor, without necessarily attending all of the education sessions and that kind of thing. I want to ask Vaughn. Obviously, this meeting is going to be a standout for you as a favorite, since it's kind of your meeting. But take this one out of the picture. What's been your favorite ASLA meeting you've ever gone to, and maybe even what's your favorite thing to do when you're at the meetings on a normal basis?
Wow, that's a tough question. I remember I loved the one in San Francisco, but I've loved the meetings in Boston a lot. That's always been a really good location. And of course, New Orleans last year, you can't miss going to New Orleans. So we've been there twice in the latest time. And those are all great places, partially because you've got quite a bit going on around the convention centers and things like that. But Chicago is great. We have very few places we can go for our meeting because we need a large space to be able to have that great expo. But I think they're all really good, and they all make for really good meeting sites. So I love to go to the education sessions, and the general sessions are always a big part of my experience. But I go to the fellows dinner almost every year. I go to the president's dinner every year because it's just interesting to see everybody there and kind of celebrate the profession and the award winners and everything too. And then the parties. You can't miss with the parties. So.
Definitely the parties. Yeah, that's good. You mentioned the fellows dinner and the president's dinner. Those are both very nice events to go to, for sure. And so you mentioned very few cities. So this year's LA. I think that we've scheduled 3 years out. Do you know the next?
We actually scheduled 5 years out. Let me see if I can tell you what there. Next year it's going to be Philadelphia, which I should have mentioned that too, because it's just a great place for a meeting. So that's bound to be a great meeting. We're going to San Diego, which is a wonderful place to go to. You always get this wonderful weather and things to see and do there. It's always a lot of fun. And then we're going to Miami. And the latest one, which we're about finalized, is Nashville, which has a new LEED Platinum convention center and can finally accommodate us. So we'll be going there too. So those are the ones I know of.
That's good. So we have 5 minutes or so left here. What's going to be when your term ends, at the end of the annual meeting, what's going to be your best memory and your biggest takeaway of your time that you served as president this year?
Well, I think my biggest takeaway is that I've been impressed for years with the ASLA staff, but I think the biggest takeaway is what an incredibly well-run organization the ASLA is, and how excited all of these staff members are about what we do. They're so invested. We keep getting. We just hired another licensed landscape architect on the staff in professional practice, and she's great. So I think that's what impresses me more than anything else, because if you have people supporting you that not only are really good and efficient, but also are passionate about the profession, you've got a lot of pressure. When these people go up to the Hill or go to talk to people about what new landscape architects do, they're so enthusiastic.
Right.
It's not just a dry sort of organizational comment. So I think that's the thing that just sticks with me more than anything else, having them, the way they've been support the profession, the way they supported me through the year.
And you forever get to be the president that dedicated or grand opening of the Center for Landscape Architecture.
Yes, that was very exciting. If anybody gets to DC, go visit the Center for Landscape Architecture, because it's great to see. It's an exciting part of town. You don't want to miss it.
All right. Well, I am going to let you kind of give any closing thoughts, closing comments that you might have. And we will prepare to wrap this up as we're approaching the top of the hour.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you very much for coming and attending. Thank you for having me, Daniel, to talk. It's a great experience. I'm excited to have met as many of you as I have, and I'm going to be around more. I'm not going to disappear this year, so it's only easing off, not quitting. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Vaughn. We hope to see all of you in Los Angeles in a couple weeks. If you're there and you see Vaughn, don't be afraid to say hi. Tell her thank you for her hard work this year, for representing you and the profession out there all around the world. All around the world.
Yeah, all around.
Stay tuned and keep your eyes open for information on our next Ask Me Anything event, which will be coming up in November. We're looking forward to that. And tell your friends. The more people that can see this, the better. And remember, they all stay online on ASLA's Facebook page, so you can always go back and reference or catch ones that you might have missed, or let your friends know, share them. Spread the word, and we can spread the word about landscape architecture. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and have a great day.